women get paid for the housework that we do?
Well, I've worked 50 years for nothing then, love.
I know. Would you like to get some back pay?
Ask him. I don't suppose the government will give me any money now.
No, not by yourself, but if millions of us got together all over the world and demanded it, what would you think about that?
Oh, if they all stuck together, we might get something.
Our first centre was in 1975 when we squatted it, a building at 129 Drummond Street, which is right near Euston Station. And it was a whole big squatting community there. The centre, it was actually opened by the Wages for Housework campaign because there wasn't really anywhere for women, to meet, bring their concerns.
Another point of organisation for us is our Women's Centre. Women come in to tell us about the struggles they're involved in, to chat, to find out what other women are doing, to see what facilities are open to them, to see how they can make contact with other women so that they can be stronger in the struggles that they're involved in.
And women just started to come along. I mean, the first visitors were women, housewives from the Bangladeshi community who had a number of issues. One is that they were being forcibly injected with the contraceptive Depo-Provera, so we had to take that up with the hospital. They were also facing eviction because the whole area, they were squatting and they were facing eviction because the area was being redeveloped. And a number of organisations were beginning to form. As you know, there's a number of, I don't know, something like 15, 16, 17 groups and projects in that base for the centre now, but in the early days, there were much fewer. There were Black Women for Wages for Housework formed, English Cadets for Prostitutes, Wages Due Lesbians, Women Against Rape. Kind of started in that centre. Began to meet there.
I think when we started the Women's Centre, it was a squat. There was no funding, and many of the groups, or all of the groups when they started, came together because they wanted to organise and to change things.
Yeah. We were there probably about 2 years, and then we were forced out, again part of the redevelopment, and temporarily moved to another squat on Drummond Street for the summer, but it was quite a summer.
And it was just very exciting. The 70s, there was just a lot going on. You felt there was kind of a lot of new ground, there were a lot of squats. We were not the only squat by any means. You just felt squatting was a kind of a standard thing. If your building was too small or you were evicted, I lived in squats myself. I squatted a number of flats. And you just squatted. So you felt that it was easier to live without a lot of money.
I've spent all morning scrubbing floors and choking on the dust, trying hard to clean my kitchen sink, the drain pipes full of rust. The midwife comes tomorrow, and if this squad don't look fine, then it's off to London Hospital. They'll induce me when it's time. And the Queen sailed off to Canada on her private yacht, while the council calls me a parasite for living in a squat.
Then after that, they really seriously did want to completely evict us, and that is when we went down to the town hall and took over the members' room in the town hall for a day. I chained myself to the railings of the balcony. Local squatters came out to support. Outside they were picketing and sending food up to us through a basket. And we'd got a petition with thousands of signatures from the local community saying, save our Women's Centre. So that was also down over the balcony onto the stand, spilling into the street. And we went to en masse to Ken Livingstone's office. He at that time was the chair of Camden Housing Department. And he was obviously astonished have all these women saying how they needed a women's centre, and you know, he had to do something. And he said, well, actually there are some places, and he had no option to say really that there were some places and he would look into it. And soon after he said there was a place, 71 Tunbridge Street, which we moved into in 1979. It was a very dilapidated place, but it was 3 rooms and a kitchen, so compared to our previous places it seemed vast. And we were there for 18 years. I was home for 18 years.
I arrived at the King's Cross Women's Centre, which was located in Tunbridge Street. Yeah. And I was like, okay, where is this women's centre? And I could see some signs, handwritten signs on the wall, which fascinated me because I was a sign writer. So I thought, this is the centre, let me go into this. And I was absolutely astonished when I walked in as to how small the space was. From quite an early time, tried to help with refurbishing some of the and dealing with some of the problems as best we could. And on average, I would come up probably once a month to London. When I say come up, at the time I was living in Bristol, so you know it was 120 miles to come up. And then I began to increase the frequency, and the centre then became a real sort of second home for me. In some ways, the memorable times have also been the times when we weren't actually in the centre, and have been about what we've managed to organise as the different groups that are based here, working collectively together.
If women were paid for all we do, I'd tell you one thing that's true is true. We wouldn't be free, but I'm telling you, there'd be a lot of wages due. And there'd be a lot of wages due for every time we smiled, in order to get a tip or two to make it almost worthwhile. And there'd be a lot of wages due for every time we're raped. And there'd be a lot of wages due for each time that we escaped. Now what do you think would happen if we women went on strike? There'd be no breakfast in the morning, there'd be no screw at night. There'd be no nurses treating you, there'd be no waitress serving you, be no typist typing you, it'd be alright. There'd be no mothers nursing you, there'd be no wives waiting on you, there'd be no daughters pleasing you, it'd be alright. There'd be a lot of wages due for every time we smiled, in order to get a tip or two to make it almost worthwhile. And there'd be a lot of wages due for every time we're raped.
You know, it didn't happen overnight, but you know, with time got more involved at the centre, and then the following year after I met the centre, we started the Invisible group in 1984. So, but that was really why I got involved, was the feeling of being welcomed and included was really the main draw. And also that everyone was there. I mean, the thing is that differences between people were acknowledged and were worked out. It wasn't that they weren't passed over, but you know, it was just an opportunity to meet a lot of different people on an equal basis.
I got involved in 1983. I was at a college. I was at a polytechnic in Kentish Town, as it happens.
Oh, okay.
And I remember sitting in the room, in the front room at the King's Cross Women's Centre, and just looking around at the walls and the things that were on the walls. And I've been learning. I was studying philosophy, and I've been learning about Marx. And I remember sitting there and thinking, my God, this is the real thing. You know, I've really found the real thing in action. You know, this is like a real community movement.
We
call saying, oh, there's an occupation, can you come? And it was called by sex workers together with Women Against Rape. And women had gone into a church in King's Cross to protest against police illegality and racism. The women had been absolutely targeted by the police, hounded, and so decided to go into a church following the example of the French sex workers strike in the 70s. So we went down. I was a student at the time, and I was just blown away because it was all kinds of women. Black women's groups came, women came from Greenham Common, Tony Benn came with his wife, women, mothers, women came with babies. There were about 5 women with little tiny babies. And those babies are now adults now with kids of their own. So it was just, that was a period when I really got involved with the centre because you felt the power of different sectors getting together, sex workers, women of colour, women, men, and just a tremendous experience.
Sometimes there was also attacks from fascist National Front in the area. There was they put like "kill queers" on the door, and they also padlocked a black women's meeting, and they also threatened to firebomb the centre with the English Collective of Prostitutes in it.
But again, I mean, whenever we were faced with these kind of threats or needed support, we really found we were able to count on the local community. People really came out. And our slogan was "Share the housework, sweep out the Nazis." We kind of marched around the streets. And in fact, they did actually go.
And it really was a community resource. And I remember how strong it was as a community resource when the council tried to throw us out, which was started, I think, in 1995, thereabouts. Maybe a bit earlier, when there was an attempt to gentrify and clean up King's Cross, and we had a ball actually fighting against the closure of the centre.
But it was not one we were going to win in the sense of actually keeping that centre, but we certainly could see when it, after being there 18 years, and I mean communities near and far kind of really came out in support. There was a huge fundraising effort to kind of keep the centre going, and that led to us moving into Kentish Town, 230 Kentish Town Road, which we called the Crossroads Women's Centre.
I was one of the people who was quite heavily involved in refurbishing that centre too, right down to physical work, because it included relaying the electrical wiring, so I had some of the skills for doing that, doing the lighting, but we had a lot of help. People were I think they were very struck by the fact that as a women's group we wanted to put our energy into making a place and space for ourselves and for the community, and not just settle for any old space.
Space across the road was much bigger. Space across the road was also wheelchair accessible when we moved there, and it meant that we could just meet, the different groups based at the Women's Centre could have more space to meet independently but also meet together, and we could have like public meetings, film showings, things like that, which we really couldn't have properly in the other one in King's Cross. We had When Visible, had self-help sessions, learning about different changes in the benefit system that the government was bringing in. We had people speaking to each other, including people from other countries who are wheelchair users, and how they organised.
The homeopathic clinic and other complementary health services started. A number of groups expanded, the All African Women's Group.
The All African Women's Group is a group of women asylum seekers from all over the world. It was formed in 2003 and it is a self-help group. We help and support each other, and we speak out against injustice. It may be injustice about housing and medical care, but mainly the asylum system. We meet every 2 weeks at the Crossroads Women's Centre. There are 40 to 50 women at each meeting. We also volunteer at the sessions that happen during the week, where we work with other women's groups like Black Women's Rape Action Project and Women Against Rape, taking calls from women in detention. We are often a lifeline for women inside Yazwood. We use our experience of being in detention and going through the asylum system to give women suggestions on what to do and send them information like Legal Action for Women's Asylum Guide. Most of the women who come to the group are mothers. Most of us have suffered rape and other torture. Some of us are separated from our children who were forced to leave behind when we fled. We see women who come to the group crying, destitute and alone. Within a month, they are able to support themselves, understand where the cases have gone wrong, and come out fighting. One unique thing about this Women's Center and our group is that any member of All African Women's Group is a person with a name and a face, whereas with main organization you find that you are just a statistic. The group gives us strength. We get called bogus asylum seekers and suffer racism and other discrimination. If an individual was to come out and speak out, they could be targeted. But as a group, we stand and we are strong.
Asylum seekers, single mother self-defence, global women's strike, they kind of all started, really got going in that centre. But in fact we quite quickly, when we realised it was actually going to get too small, and almost straight away started having to fundraise and actually look for a bigger place.
The most difficult thing was to raise the money to do it in the first place. That was hell on wheels. And people were so astonished that a group of grassroots women could get this together that they really pitched in to help and donated things for the sales that we had, to raise money, and the Christmas fairs and things like that. Some people came to paint, because we had to do that painting to save the money. And people volunteered. They were very kind, and they really felt that they were making it their centre, which indeed they had done.
And there were working groups on the disability access and the solar panels and the insulation, and keep making it sustainable and making it green and disability accessible. And so it was a lot of work over, I think it was about a year we were working on it in total. So we can now kind of have much bigger public meetings, and we can actually have conferences downstairs. We also have these more private offices, so we can meet if somebody comes in who wants help and wants to speak confidentially, we can more easily do that than we could across the road. So it's made a massive difference.
It's really that the community doesn't have much chance to get together without officials, and that we're always begging for a place to meet, the mums groups and the community groups and the tenants associations, and you often have to pay through the nose for a meeting hall. And we wanted a base for women and their families to be able to come together for what they felt they needed.
There's a lot of groups based here, and I work with the English Collective of Prostitutes, which is the group of sex workers based at this centre, and the political work that we do is we campaign for the decriminalisation and safety of prostitution. The political work is that we also campaign for money and resources so that women can leave prostitution if they want to, and that obviously links in with the political work of the centre against benefit sanctions and against the welfare reforms and the welfare cuts and cuts to single mothers. I mean, all the different groups here do a lot of work making connections between issues, and that's something that's changed the way that I look at things, that a lot of things are connected nationally and internationally.
Capitalism is a few. post-capitalism, real new society. Some people call it socialism, some people call it communism, some people just call it a better society or a better world. That is based on everybody saying what should be and how it should be in a collective way where each individual matters, but the collective also matters. We have an international network, and we have to have a world, you know, the world that I was describing has to be just on an international level, you know, the end of war, the absolute end of war, and the end of ecological devastation. So, and people in a lot of places in the world where we're in touch are doing similar things.
So we were able, because there was this center in London, to do some work in Montreal. So, we, at the time, the internet really wasn't available, so it was all done by post and by long distance and all that. There was a men's group that was created, I think, in '75. And in fact, there was a conference in '88, and some of the men in Pay, they invited me to do creche work, because that was one of the things that men were invited to do to support the work that women were doing. So here I was with all these kids and all that, which was a new experience, but you know, it was good. And then we were also able to join in some workshop and all that, some discussion.
There are many things that have to happen, and there's no place where people can get together, or very few places. Often there are church halls, but this is for everyone, beginning with women. And we begin with women, because if you don't begin with women, the women and the children are left out. But if you begin with women, everybody is included. And if you feel you're going to win, you're going to fight harder, and you're going to be cannier, you're going to be smarter, because you expect to win, and you're more hopeful and see more possibilities. You know, I mean, women are, yeah, very resourceful. And of course we've just learned so much from so many women come into the centre. You know, we all learn from each other.
Because as women we're often more than just one thing, so it's really, you know, I think one of the memorable things is to have so many different organisations based here, so that if we are in need of support and we are in need of working things out amongst ourselves as to how we're going to shape or form campaigns, we can do it in a way where we are not promoting our own particular needs, say as black women or as lesbian women or as women with disabilities, over the needs of others. That we, on the one hand, retain our autonomy, and on the other hand, we can work together and pool our skills and resources, which of course become much greater when we are not fighting alone.
For all we do, I'd tell you one thing that's true is true. We wouldn't be free, but I'm telling you, there'd be a lot of wages due. And there'd be a lot of wages due for every time we smile, in order to get a tip or two to make it almost worthwhile. And there'd be a lot of wages due for every time we're raped. And there'd be a lot of wages due for each time that we escaped. Now what do you think would happen if we women went on strike? There'd be no breakfast in the morning, there'd be no screw at night. There'd be no nurses treating you, there'd be no waitress serving you, be no typist typing you, it'd be alright. There'd be no mothers nursing you, there'd be no wives waiting on you, there'd be